What if the most powerful thing you could ever say is nothing at all? Let that question settle, not in your mind, but in your soul. Because there comes a moment in every man's life when silence isn't a lack of response. It's a declaration of inner truth. It's the moment you realize you don't need to explain your worth to someone who couldn't recognize it in your presence. No more revenge texts, no more emotional monologues sent into a void, no more performing for someone who already made their choice. You don't go quiet to punish her. You go quiet because you finally understand peace is not something she can give you. It's something you had to reclaim. A stoic man doesn't spiral. He doesn't chase for closure or beg to be seen. He lets go, not because he doesn't feel the pain, but because he refuses to become it. And in that choice, he is not rejected. He is redirected back to himself, to the man who no longer needs permission to move forward. She thought you'd collapse under the weight of absence, but you didn't. You stood. And that silence she now hears, it isn't cold, it's final. Not cruel, but clear. It tells her everything she didn't expect to learn. You no longer live in the space she left behind. If you're ready to rise, not from anger, but from understanding. If you're ready to let silence be your answer, then join the journey. Like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications and comment below. I release what I cannot control. This is Stoic Station, where we don't beg for clarity, we become it. Now, let's dive in. 1. The power of silence. Silence is often misunderstood. People see it as surrender, as weakness, as avoidance. But the truth is, real silence, the kind that comes from within a man who's walked through fire, is not retreat. It's realignment. It's the moment you stop reacting to a world that no longer deserves your energy, and instead begin to anchor yourself in something far deeper, inner peace. You don't stop talking because you've given up. You stop talking because you've finally realized not everything deserves an answer. You've come to understand that your presence is not a favor to be wasted. That your words, once freely given in the hope of being understood, now hold too much weight to be thrown at someone who stopped listening long ago. Silence, then, becomes your sanctuary. When you choose silence, not out of spite, but out of clarity, you break a pattern. You're no longer trying to fix what broke you. You're no longer offering explanations to someone who never valued your voice. And in that stillness, you reclaim something powerful, your self-respect. The man who speaks out of pain is still bound to the chaos. But the man who chooses stillness has stepped beyond it. He no longer needs to be heard because he finally hears himself. This isn't the silence of waiting. It's not the silence of hoping she notices or of quietly suffering behind the scenes. This is the silence of release, the kind that follows acceptance, the kind that whispers, "I've made peace with your absence, and I've come home to myself." It's the silence of a man who no longer needs closure from someone else because he's already closed the chapter from within. And it's in that silence that everything shifts. Because she expects noise. She expects the chase. She expects a reaction. But when all she's met with is your stillness, the power dynamic collapses. You are no longer accessible, no longer predictable. You've become a mystery, one she can't reach, can't provoke, can't figure out. And that silence, it echoes, it lingers in the spaces where your presence once lived, in the messages she no longer receives, in the attention that once fed her sense of control. Silence is not the absence of love, it's the presence of boundaries. It's how a man reclaims his power without shouting, how he says enough without raising his voice. It's not dramatic, it's dignified, and it doesn't fade, it stays. Long after she's forgotten the sound of your voice, she'll still remember how your silence felt. because nothing leaves a deeper mark than a man who chose peace and never looked back. That is the true power of silence. 2. Control what you can, release what you can't. A man wastes his power trying to control outcomes he never truly owned. The moment you attempt to manage someone else's feelings, decisions, or loyalty, you hand over pieces of yourself in exchange for illusions. Illusions of certainty, of closeness, of control. But real strength doesn't come from gripping tighter. It comes from knowing when to let go. You can't convince someone to love you with words. You can't fill silence with long messages or fix broken trust with desperate effort. Love, at its core, is a choice. Respect, once lost, can't be begged back. And the harder you try to win it through desperation, the more you confirm that you've already lost yourself. The moment you stop clinging to someone who's already slipping away is the exact moment your strength begins. That shift from holding on to holding yourself together is where your power lives. When you stop chasing a connection that no longer shows up for you, you begin returning home to your own value. You control your breath, your presence, your path forward. And that's not small, it's everything. Because when a man anchors himself in what he can command, he becomes steady, grounded, and untouchable. Everything else, her confusion, her indecision, her silence, is her business, not your burden. Let her figure out what she wants without you bending to fill in the blanks. True masculinity isn't about dominance, it's about discernment. Knowing where your time, your energy, and your love are truly respected. It's about investing in places that give life back, not drain you of it. So ask yourself honestly, are you chasing closure or are you claiming clarity? Are you trying to be chosen or are you finally ready to choose yourself? Because the man who no longer fights to be chosen becomes the man who chooses. And when he does, he stops waiting to be enough for someone else and starts being more than enough for the life he deserves. 3. Attraction through absence. When you disappear with intention, you don't become less, you become rare. That's the part most men don't realize until it's too late. They believe that constant presence equals love, that availability proves loyalty. But when your energy is always there, always responding, always waiting, there's nothing left for her to wonder about. And when there's nothing to wonder about, there's nothing left to value. Availability, when unreciprocated, breeds invisibility. The more you showed up for her, the more predictable you became, and the more predictable you became, the less space she had to feel your presence. It didn't matter how deeply you cared, how loyal you were, or how many times you reached out. When she didn't have to earn your attention, she slowly stopped noticing it. But when you step away, not out of bitterness, not out of ego, but with grace and self-respect, your absence shifts everything. It doesn't just create silence, it creates a mirror. And in that mirror, she doesn't just see the emptiness, she sees what used to fill it, the consistency, the peace, the grounded presence she never thought would disappear, the strength she mistook for permanence. Your absence becomes a louder teacher than your words ever were. It echoes through the quiet moments, when the notifications stop, when the calls don't come, when her reflection is no longer warmed by your gaze. And in that void, questions begin to stir, not just where are you, but what did I overlook, and why do I feel this now? Let your absence echo louder than your words. Let her question what she once assumed would always be there. Because true attraction doesn't always grow from attention. It often grows in the absence of it. While she replays your silence, you don't wait. You move, not toward her, but deeper into yourself, into your purpose, into your stillness, into the man who no longer needs to perform for affection. Absence isn't rejection, it's respect for yourself, your energy, your worth. And when given with calm, deliberate distance, it becomes the most magnetic force of all. Fourth, let her sit with her choices. She made a choice, whether with words, silence, or a slow drift away. It doesn't matter if it was loud or quiet, intentional or passive. She still made it, and choices come with consequences, not cushions. There's no need to soften the landing for someone who decided to let go of what you offered freely. You're not the man she turns to when the world gets cold after she's walked away from your warmth. You're not her emotional crutch, her safety net, or her backup plan. You're a man with value, and your love was a gift, not a guarantee. It's tempting to want to offer her peace, even after she disrupted yours, to step in and ease her guilt, to give her reassurance that even in leaving, she's still cared for. But that would only rob her of the weight she needs to carry. That would make it easier for her to forget what she let go of. When you catch someone falling from a decision they chose, you don't protect them. You protect their illusion that choices don't have costs. Let her scroll through your silence. Let her feel the absence. Let her question why the man who once checked in, once cared so deeply, no longer reacts. Let her wonder why your silence isn't laced with anger or heartbreak, why it feels so still, so finished. That silence, it's not bitterness, it's maturity. It's the quiet dignity of a man who knows his worth and no longer begs to be seen. She doesn't get to walk away and still expect a rescue. She doesn't get to push you aside and keep your loyalty on standby. She chose distance, and you, finally, chose dignity. This isn't about punishment, it's about presence, about letting her sit with her own decision, feel its weight, and see what life feels like without your stability. You're not waiting in the shadows for her to come back. You're walking forward in the light of your own peace. And the silence she hears now, that's not rejection, that's reality. 5. Rebuild in silence, rise in shadows. Real comebacks aren't posted. They don't need captions, filters, or validation. They happen in quiet moments, when no one's watching, when no one's applauding. You don't rebuild to be seen. You rebuild because the version of you that once tolerated less is no longer acceptable. You don't do it to prove her wrong. You do it to prove to yourself that you were never broken, just buried. You rebuild for direction, not display. Not to show her what she lost, but to rediscover what you've always had within. While others post to prove they're okay, you grind to grow. Every early morning run, every late night book, every boundary you enforce, every dollar you earn, none of it is for show. It's the slow, patient work of a man turning pain into fuel and purpose into structure. This journey isn't loud because it's sacred. The glow-up isn't meant to be served to her as a spectacle. It's meant to be felt in your energy, your clarity, your confidence. You upgrade your mindset because the old one couldn't carry where you're going. You upgrade your body, not out of spite, but out of reverence. You take control of your finances because you refuse to be unstable again, not just for you, but for the life you're now building. Your boundaries become sharp, not as walls, but as gates to protect what you've rebuilt. Let your progress become a mystery. Let it spread in whispers. Let her hear about the new you through silence, not showmanship. Not because you owe her curiosity, but because your evolution no longer revolves around her awareness. And if one day she stumbles across your life again, let it be as a stranger. Let her see a man she no longer recognizes, and more importantly, a man she no longer has access to. Not because you shut her out with bitterness, but because you've outgrown the space where she left you. You didn't rise to be noticed. You rose because staying down was never an option, and in the shadows, you became something unshakable. 6. Emotion is a tool, not a master. You're allowed to feel. More than that, you're meant to. Suppressing emotion isn't strength, and pretending you don't care doesn't make you powerful. What makes you powerful is learning to feel deeply without letting those feelings dictate your every move. Pain is not your enemy. It's a signal, a compass. But only when you're the one holding it, not the one being pulled blindly by it. Most men were never taught how to handle emotion. They were taught to tough it out, bury it, or let it explode. That's why so many drown in their feelings, because no one ever showed them how to channel instead of collapse. But you've reached a place in your life where that story doesn't have to be yours anymore. You've lived enough to know that pain, when left unprocessed, doesn't disappear. It just waits, showing up in your actions, in your voice, in the decisions you later regret. You feel deeply, but you move wisely. You give yourself space to sit with what hurts, but you don't let it control the direction of your life. You don't send that message just because you miss her. You don't act on the ache. You observe it, you name it, and you let it work on you, not to break you, but to shape you. That is emotional strength, not numbness, not coldness, but conscious control. The ability to hold sorrow without letting it speak for you. The discipline to let the wave pass before you decide where to stand next. The courage to face the mirror when your heart is raw and still choose growth. The man who commands his emotions doesn't deny them. He respects them, but he never lets them lead, because he knows that emotion is a tool, not a master. And once he learns how to use it, truly use it, he becomes something rare, steady, grounded, untouchable, not because he's hard, but because he's whole. 7. No response is a response. You don't owe her a text, not a final message, not a closing conversation wrapped in polite explanation. The version of you that once believed he needed to be understood in order to move on. He's no longer here. The man she once expected to argue, to defend himself, to chase after clarity, he's gone. What remains now is silence. And not the kind born from bitterness, but the kind forged in peace, grounded, certain, unshakable. She was prepared for resistance. She anticipated conflict. She expected the emotional pull, the back and forth that used to define your dynamic. But what she wasn't ready for was your disappearance. Not dramatic, not cruel, just complete. And in that stillness, she meets something she can't manipulate. The truth that you're no longer participating. No more explanations, no more justifying your absence, no more proving your point. Because silence doesn't need proof. It holds its own weight. It says, without saying, I've made peace with your choice, and I'm no longer offering myself where I'm not received. She may scroll through old messages, waiting for one more line, one more reply that never comes. But what she'll find is the deepest form of closure. Nothing. And that nothing is not emptiness. It's the full expression of a man who has reclaimed his power and chosen to use it in the quietest, most decisive way possible. You walked away without a sound, and that silence, it says everything. 8. Reframe the narrative. You weren't rejected, you were redirected toward a version of yourself that you wouldn't have met if she had stayed. It may not feel like it now, but what ended wasn't your worth. What ended was your attachment to a story that no longer served you. She didn't close your book, she turned the page. And that shift? It wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more honest. She didn't end your story. She gave it a plot twist, one that at first felt like a collapse, but in time revealed itself as a course correction. Because what if her walking away wasn't a loss, but a liberation? What if the pain was not punishment, but preparation? What if this heartbreak is not breaking you apart, but breaking you open? You didn't fail. You found out. You found out where the cracks were, where you were giving more than you were receiving, where your value was questioned, where your heart was trying to hold together something already slipping. And that realization, while painful, is clarity. You didn't lose love. You lost illusion. The idea of what could have been. The hope that if you gave just a little more, she'd see your worth. But love that has to be proven again and again was never love. It was survival. This pain, when reframed, becomes a gift. A brutal one, yes, but one that strips away what's false so you can rebuild something real. You don't just recover from this. You evolve, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. And that's how the story changes. Not with her return, but with your rebirth. 9. Become the man you'd respect. This isn't about becoming the man she regrets losing. That path is shallow, rooted in performance and ego. The goal isn't to haunt her memories, it's to stand firmly in your own. This journey is about becoming the man you'd trust if everything fell apart. The kind of man who could lead through fire, carry calm through chaos, and never abandon himself for acceptance. Would you trust the man in your mirror? Would you follow his direction if your life depended on it? Could you look into his eyes and know he'd never fold under pressure, never betray what matters for short-term comfort? And more importantly, would you be proud if your son became him? Because that's your real standard now, not her validation, not her apology, but your own inner measure of strength, integrity, and grounded presence. You build a life so full, her absence no longer echoes, not because you replaced her with someone else, but because you filled the space with someone far more lasting, yourself. The version of you who no longer chases what doesn't stay, who no longer lowers his worth to be seen, who no longer reacts just to feel wanted. This version of you walks slower, but with purpose, speaks less, but with more weight, loves deeper, but never at the cost of self-respect. And by the time she realizes what she lost, you won't be the same man she walked away from. You'll be someone she wouldn't even recognize, because you didn't become him for her, you became him for you. 10. The echo of your absence. You didn't scream, you didn't beg, you didn't need to slam doors or make a grand exit. You simply stepped back, quietly, completely, and in that silence, something powerful took root. She expected a reaction, a final plea, some signal that she still had your attention, but what she found was something far more unsettling. Nothing. That stillness lingers. It hums in the background of her days. She hears it in the absence of your name, in the silence where your presence used to be. She feels it when your energy no longer surrounds her life like it once did, steady, patient, forgiving. There are no more messages, no more last chances, no more quiet reassurances that you'll always be there. You've gone, not in anger, but in peace, and that peace speaks louder than any argument ever could. Your absence becomes her echo chamber. It reflects back not just the space you left behind, but the space within herself she never filled. And over time, what she misses isn't just you. It's the version of herself she became when she was loved by you. The safety, the attention, the certainty, all of it gone, replaced by a silence she never imagined could be so loud. But by then, your story has already moved on, not because you erased her, but because you remembered yourself. You didn't disappear to wound her, you disappeared to rebuild. And now, while she sits in the echo of what once was, you're living in the presence of what's next, not in bitterness, in power. In summary, you didn't go silent to manipulate her. You didn't disappear to spark curiosity or play some strategic game of absence. You went silent because something within you shifted, because you finally remembered who you are beneath the noise, beneath the chasing, beneath the version of yourself you had been shrinking into just to hold on to someone who was already letting go. This silence wasn't about her, It was about you choosing yourself after forgetting your worth for far too long. You chose dignity over desperation. You chose direction over distraction, stillness over struggle. Not because it was easy, but because you realized peace was more important than being understood by someone who never truly saw you. You didn't vanish to teach her a lesson. You vanished because you learned your own. The lesson that your value doesn't increase by being more available, that your presence doesn't need to be proven, that walking away without noise takes far more strength than holding on with words that go nowhere. Now, your silence stands where your explanations used to live. It doesn't beg to be acknowledged. It simply exists, steady and complete. And in that stillness, you've become something rare. A man who no longer tries to be unforgettable through attention, but through absence. Through the courage to walk away when staying meant losing yourself. Because in the end, it's not what you say that defines you. It's what you walk away from when your peace is on the line. And that choice, calm, clear, unwavering, that's the legacy. So if you're done speaking for the sake of being heard and ready to be remembered for what you no longer entertain, say it aloud. My silence is my legacy. If you're done chasing closure that never comes and ready to let silence speak for what words never could, then this is your moment. Leave the past where it belongs, not in pieces, but in peace. If this message spoke to you, support the journey by liking this video, subscribing, and turning on notifications. Drop a comment below. I leave with peace, not pieces. This is Stoic Station, where strength is quiet, clarity is power, and your silence becomes your legacy. Stay grounded, stay silent, stay unshakable. Your next chapter doesn't need noise. It needs intention.